Welcome to episode 10, where we're going to talk about generative versus discriminative AI. Remember back to episode 1 when we defined artificial intelligence as machines pursuing goals. This encompasses a lot of different technologies. A subset of artificial intelligence is machine learning, and a subset of that is deep learning, which we've talked about in previous episodes. What we're here to talk about in this episode is generative AI. That is one small portion of deep learning. Now remember back to episode 1 when we talked about what most people imagine when they think AI? Most people imagine generative AI, either in the form of chatbots generating text or in the form of image or video generation models. So while the vast majority of the public thinks AI is just generative AI is a really tiny component of all that AI is. And so far in these episodes, we've been talking about discriminative AI. But now we're going to start shifting our attention towards generative AI for the remainder of the episodes. What's the difference between these? Let's look at discriminative AI. The goal of discriminative AI is to try to learn a boundary between classes. How do we separate the orange data from the gray data? Generative AI, on the other hand, has a goal of learning the distributions of the classes, answering the question, how do we generate orange and gray data that looks real? What do I mean when I say distribution? Well, I'm talking about a probability distribution, which we discussed in a previous episode. Just a quick review on that is we take a bunch of training data and we learn a distribution from that data. So, did we take the best soccer players, college players, recreational players? We took some amount of players in global football or soccer, and we developed this probability distribution based on real training data. And you can notice that a large proportion of this data is right there at the average, which is around 6 feet for a global football player. But we have these tails. Remember, we had some outliers who were very tall or who were on the shorter side. So how do I actually use this probability distribution then for generative AI? Well, I use this probability distribution to sample from. And sampling means I want a list of 10 heights of global football players. And so I will pull out a sample from this probability distribution. I want to generate those heights. And these heights are going to be generated based on this probability distribution. So it's going to reflect the training data. So you'll see most of the data that is sampled is going to be right there close to the average, just like the training data. And then you'll have a few samples that are going to be close to those training data outliers, where we had people who were very tall or people who were on the shorter side. What if we wanted to have multiple probability distributions? So we have global football players, but let's say we also had training data for gymnasts. And so you can see there in red, gymnasts are typically a bit shorter than global football players. And so we see that red probability distribution. And then we also want to look at basketball players. So we created a data set of basketball player heights, and you can see they're on the taller side. And so their probability distribution is shown here in green with the dashed line. So now if I do a sampling across my 3 distributions, I'm going to get a sample that looks something like this, that pulls out data from all of those probability distributions. But what if I want to do a conditional generation? So even though I have training data from gymnasts, from soccer players, and from basketball players, I want to condition my generation, say only look at the probability distribution for basketball players. And so that's exactly what I'm going to do here. And I'm going to sample data directly from the basketball player distribution. And generative AI models, like large language models, are making predictions or generations based on a learned probability distribution. And it allows us to do a lot of amazing things, from chatbots to generative image models to generative video models to generative audio models. Thank you for joining me for this episode in the AI for People Who Hate Math series. This is an unscripted series that is inspired by my conversations with people who feel like they can't conceptually understand AI because it's just too much math. And it usually is. Most AI classes, tutorials, and videos are full of math. The AI classes that I teach as a professor have math on nearly every slide. I wanted to challenge this assumption that AI could only be conceptualized by people with strong math backgrounds. Especially as AI permeates our daily lives, I think it's important that everyone understands the technology, at least conceptually, because without it, we're putting a lot of trust into systems we don't understand. Feel free to let me know in the comments if there are topics that you want to see covered. The initial launch is 20 episodes, and I am excited to see what you think.